Good to be with you this morning as I see many familiar faces from the relationship between Knox and River Glen, and then also through the Great Banquet community. It's an honor, and I'm truly humbled that Dave and Becca had invited me to come and speak to you today for your summer series, Life Lessons from the Old Testament. Today I'm going to talk about the covenantal relationship between Jonathan and David. Of course, there's many other examples of close friendships and relationships in the Bible, such as Jesus and his disciples, especially with his inner circle of Peter, James, and John. Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy, which is an example of the three relationships that everyone should have: a mentor, a peer, and a mentee. Jethro and Moses, the wise father-in-law passing on wisdom to his son-in-law. Ruth and Naomi, relatives supporting each other through life's challenges. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, friends together in the fire. While those are all great examples, I hope to demonstrate that the friendship between Jonathan and David shows how loyalty and emotional intimacy between two friends can honor God and give us a model for deeper, more authentic friendships. So let me start by giving you a little bit of my background to show how I discovered these important relationships in the Bible and how the principles apply to all of us today. As some of you know, I became involved in the men's group at River Glen Presbyterian Church on the northwest side here in Naperville more than 20 years ago during a struggle with workaholism that teetered on depression. I've spoken about my journey at the men's great banquet, but the short story is that my lovely wife, Cindy, suggested that I join the men's Bible study at River Glen to get my mind on something else besides work. I was in a period where I couldn't slow my mind down, and I was not sleeping well due to the stress of my growing career and the responsibility of an expanding family. I was working 6, sometimes 7 days a week just to stay on top of the workload. I had become short-tempered, distant, and was probably drinking alcohol more than I should. With 3 little kids at home and a wife who also worked full-time, we were definitely in the stress bubble of life like so many families today. I was not where I wanted to be at that stage of my life. You could say I had my priorities wrong. Fortunately, visits to the doctor and the support of my family and my church helped me through that very difficult season. It was in that men's group that I began to learn the biblical concepts about becoming a better man, a better husband, a better father, and a better friend. Our senior pastor at the time set the tone in the men's group for being vulnerable by sharing his own story about work-life imbalance. Over time, the guys in the group started to open up slowly about their own struggles with a variety of issues, like addictions, anger, abuse, workaholism, and loneliness. C.S. Lewis is famously quoted as saying, "Friendship is born at the moment when one man says to another, 'What, you too? I thought no one but myself, ... You can fill in the blank." Over the years, I've encountered many guys, both outside and inside the church, who've struggled with one or more of these issues at one time or another. The problems were everywhere, especially among men, but nobody was talking about them. What we needed were trusting and dependable friends who could listen and help us through these issues. Over the years, I found that some friendships form almost instantly, but most take time to reach the depth of connection that we need. Sadly, most friendships never get to that level. As we will learn, David and Jonathan formed an instant bond over a common element, their loyalty to God. So back to our men's group. Several of us began forming new friendships. We liked hanging out together. We took in baseball games. We golfed, we ran, and we biked together. We were building deeper relationships for the encouragement, support, and accountability needed to become more godly men. At one of our later men's group meetings, we were lamenting the loss of some of our old friendships, like high school teammates, bowling buddies, and fraternity brothers. I'm not sure why. I think it was the Holy Spirit, but what I said was we needed today was God buddies. These were friends who would help us live up to God's standards rather than what we had learned on how to live in the past. The term just stuck and has become the foundation for almost everything that we do in our men's group. Over the years, the guys kept telling me that I needed to write a book about God buddies, so I started a blog on the topic over one Christmas break. After a couple years, I turned the content into a manuscript and self-published a book called Get Out of Your Man Cave, The Crisis of Male Friendships. Although it may never become a New York Times bestseller or appear on Oprah's summer reading list, the book did become an unexpected bucket list accomplishment. More importantly, it opened up opportunities to speak about the need for deeper, more authentic friendships, especially for men. I've spoken on this topic to your Mankind and Daybreakers group, at the Men's Great Banquet, and at several other churches. I've been a guest on several podcasts and had an article on friendship published in a prominent university magazine. Some people have asked if there's a female version of God buddies coming. And while the concepts do apply to female friends, I'm not sure I'm really qualified to write that one. So I'm going to leave that up to someone else to write. That said, most people will agree that men just don't know how to do friendships as well. In every instance I've spoken on this topic, the message about the need for better male friendships resonates with both males and females, husbands and wives. So with that background, and my apology for the plug of the book, let's explore the friendship of Jonathan and David. It's a biblical relationship that's been misunderstood and misused over the years. So our first reading comes from the Gospel of John. These verses come immediately after Jesus uses the metaphor of the vine and the branches to represent the need for his followers to stay in a relationship with God, with him, Jesus, and with other Christians. Reading from John 15, verses 12 to 17. My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I commanded. I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command, love each other. So Christ's statement to the disciples in verse 13 was to lay down your life for your friends. Jesus encourages the 12 to stay connected with each other after he leaves them so that their lives will produce fruit as they spread the gospel. Jesus literally laid down his life for them and for all of us. What a remarkable gift of grace that shows what true selfless love looks like. In the story of Jonathan and David, we will also see an example of selfless love. We will learn about two friends who figuratively laid down their lives for each other, putting aside their egos and positions of privilege. Upon doing so, they created this covenantal friendship to support and love each other in ways that may seem unusual to us today. So I might suggest that today, with the levels of isolation, stress, and anxiety reaching epidemic levels in America, we need more of this type of close, deep, authentic friendships between people who know each other intimately and friends who can learn to do life together. So now on to the story of Jonathan and David. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to quickly summarize the story, which is covered in 31 chapters of 1 Samuel. I won't cover the whole thing. I'm going to highlight the main points and conclude with the key traits that show how Jonathan and David's friendships relate to us today. So first, a little historical setting. It's not a great one. Israel was ruled by judges and then by priests. It's typical Old Testament times. Follow God, fall away, bring in some idols and kings, suffer through some plagues and wars, find a new leader, come back to God, repeat the cycle. As expected, the people were asking for a king. But God instructs the priest Samuel to warn Israel that their request for a king was not a good one. But the Israelites insist, so Samuel appoints Saul, a tall, dark, handsome man from a wealthy family, as the next king. Saul, however, was known for his foolishness, pride, and disobedience. His insecurities, as we will learn, will lead to his downfall. Jonathan is Saul's oldest son and next in line to become king. 2 Samuel describes him as having a great strength and swiftness. He excels in archery and slinging stones. Most importantly, Jonathan was a man of true character, faith, and integrity, quite the opposite of his father. As we know from the early parts of the book of 1 Samuel, David was the youngest son of Jesse and the one God tells Samuel to anoint as the future king of Israel. At the time, David was considered too young to go into battle, but he was an accomplished harp player who gets called to play for the king to help ease his increasing torment and anxiety. Due to this musical prowess, David is elevated to an armor bearer in the king's court, where he and Jonathan instantly become good friends. Scholars say Jonathan is at least 28 and David just 18. Of course, we know David goes on to kill Goliath and distinguishes himself as an excellent warrior in the ongoing battles against the Philistines. Chapter 17 ends as Saul hears about this great new warrior and calls David to his palace. While David is still holding the Philistine's head, King Saul asks, "Whose son are you, young man?" And David replies, "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." Now let's go to our second reading from 1 Samuel chapter 18, starting with verse 1. This is titled Jonathan's Covenant with David. When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of his robe that he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. As a result, Saul set him over the army. And all the people, even the servants of Saul, approved. So continue on in chapter 18. After yet another successful battle, King Saul is pleased with David's accomplishments and says he'll give his daughter Michal to him in marriage. But when Saul realizes that the Lord is truly with David and his daughter really loves him, he becomes afraid and would remain David's enemy for the rest of his days. Saul eventually becomes very jealous and plans to have David killed. But he makes the big mistake of telling Jonathan to take some servants to kill David. Due to their covenantal friendship, though, Jonathan had David's back. He warns him of Saul's anger, so David goes into hiding. Jonathan says, "My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning so that you can go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you, and I will tell you what I find out." The two meet up later in the wilderness and make plans for David to take over as the next king of Israel. But due to their covenantal agreement, Jonathan would be the second in command. And David would agree to protect his family if Jonathan dies. This would be the last time they see each other. In chapter 31, Jonathan and his two brothers are killed in a battle at Mount Gilboa. Saul, groaning about their death, falls on his own sword, and David becomes king of Judah sooner than expected. In those days, it was customary to kill the previous king's entire family line, but David wanted to honor the memory of his close friend and still show respect for his father, the king. Upon taking the throne, David asks, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Ziba, a servant of Saul's household, answers the new king, "There is still a son of Jonathan, but he is lame in both feet." Jonathan had left behind a son, Mephibosheth, who had been crippled since the age of 5, but was now living in hiding, again, due to the fear of the descendants of the previous king being killed. David calls Mephibosheth to the palace and says he will restore all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. David provides him with workers for the fields and servants to care for him. Mephibosheth now has land, a title, and servants to provide for his entire needs the rest of his life. David has taken care of Jonathan's family as he promised. So let's look at the important aspects of the covenantal friendship between Jonathan and David. I found that sometimes friendships form almost instantly. Have you ever met somebody that you just knew from the very beginning that you were going to be good friends? It's very rare to have an immediate connection like that. But many friendships start when two people have something in common, like a favorite baseball team, a hobby, or a common interest, or kids in the same grade. But as you spend more time together in that commonality, you may find that the two of you develop some chemistry. David and Jonathan had chemistry. I personally believe that this chemistry comes from the Holy Spirit to us today, and that brings together friends for specific purposes, even if it's not for along the same magnitude as Jonathan and David's. So I want to highlight several qualities from the friendship between Jonathan and David that can create our deepest, most authentic friendships. Number one, there was a commitment to God, not to each other. Before they loved each other as friends, they loved God first. And I've found that your most valuable and reliable friendships will come with those who love God before anything else. Number two, they sacrificed for one another. In 1 Samuel 18:4, we read that Jonathan gave David his clothes and his military garb. The significance of this gift was that Jonathan recognized that David would one day be the next king of Israel. So rather than being envious or jealous, Jonathan submitted to God's will and sacrificed his own right to the throne. It's that chemistry thing. These spiritual friends both felt a connection so strong that the heir apparent to the throne would give up his future, and in return, the future king vowed to take care of his family's friend if he died. In my opinion, friendships today could use more of that kind of sacrificial love. We need to move from making acquaintances and connections. We need to move from friendships based on what can you do for me to having a smaller group of deep, authentic friendships who help each other become the best versions of themselves. Number three, they let nothing come between them and remained loyal to each other. Earlier, we heard about Jonathan's defense of David when King Saul wanted to kill him. Jonathan rebuked his father and recalled David's faithfulness to his kingdom after killing Goliath. Jonathan and David made a covenant to take care of each other regardless of what would happen to them. Sadly, many people today that you thought were your best friends may desert you when you suffer a personal setback, retire, or become too busy to spend as much time together. This was not true in David and Jonathan's case. There was no jealousy or no envy. They were loyal to each other regardless of their circumstances and position. Number 4, they drew closer together when their friendship was tested. This is the true test of a friendship. The greater the pressure, the closer you will become. When one of you is attacked by the evil one, friends come closer together to you in prayer and support, and that's how you know you have a really deep spiritual friendship. Jonathan and David drew closer once they knew of Saul's plan to kill David. And even though he had been anointed the future king, David could not attack King Saul, even when he was given the chance twice. Jonathan and David planned their future together, including agreeing to care for each other's family. Number 5, they were free to express their emotions with each other. I mentioned earlier that this relationship is often misunderstood and misused. Culture today has tried to convince us that two men cannot be close friends, nor that they should show their emotions to each other. But Jonathan and David's friendship was a different kind of love, one that's viewed more as being brothers. The city of Philadelphia is nicknamed the city of brotherly love for this very reason, since its name comes from the Greek words phileo, which means love, and adelphos, which meaning brothers. In 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 41 and 42 says, David bowed down before Jonathan 3 times, and they kissed each other and cried together. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have a sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord. Because the Lord is the witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever." This interchange showed their brotherly love was based on the covenant to God. Now, I've been in a small group of men who have been really vulnerable with each other, sharing our struggles with a variety of very deep issues and holding each other accountable to live to a higher standard. We've cried together, we've prayed together, and we've laughed together. Our group has reached a depth of emotional intimacy that is rare among friendships today, especially for men. This depth has helped us support each other through all kinds of issues. We've reached a point where any one of us could call each other in the middle of the night if needed. So I'd ask you, do you have any of those kind of 2 a.m. friends? And finally, number 6, they remained friends to the end. Through numerous battles with the Philistines, Jonathan and David looked out for each other. They made plans to work together in David's kingdom, but after Jonathan was killed, their covenant ensured David would look after Jonathan's son for the rest of his life. So as I wrap up my message, I hope you can see why friendships like Jonathan and David's demonstrates a brotherly love that involves loyalty, sacrifice, compromise, emotional attachment, and appropriate expressions of love. It wasn't formed out of loneliness or to avoid isolation or for the need for more social media followers. It was formed first out of love for God's kingdom. For us New Testament Christians, that same loyalty to God is just as important. But our closest friendships today can become our circle of support and encouragement that'll help us through the daily struggles that we will all encounter. They should also challenge us to become more like Jesus, the one who loves everyone unconditionally, regardless of their beliefs, gender, race, privilege, or position of royalty. And that's what a true covenantal friendship is all about. Amen?